for us to take a look at is this idea of kneading. And how to do that in a way that makes the best use of creating a twist or a torsion into the tissue without it really straining you. And it is one of the harder methods to become proficient with. So I've got this slide up that Luke had put together to try to take this group of massage therapists that had been trained all kinds of different ways and bring them into a center point where we could discuss what we were doing. And he came up with this idea: cross the line, walk the line, crisscross. So a lot of times massage is taught, you know, follow the muscle fiber, go from attachment to attachment. That is only going to change or distort the tissue one direction. So that's walk the line, okay? Cross the line would be to go this way instead, all right? Which is going to create a whole different force, stress into the tissues. And then crisscross, which is kind of ends up being our kneading idea, or going in multiple directions with it. If you do that, cross the line, walk the line, crisscross, in every one of these functional units, you're going to accomplish just about anything that you want to accomplish. And you vary the pressure so that you get from surface tissue down into the deeper tissues that actually are more around the bone. And how you use a combination of joint movement to augment that, pull something down and move it, having an idea of what you are doing. If you are shortening one area, you're automatically lengthening another, you know, and start to get this idea in here about what am I trying to accomplish, and how you do that with your direction. So if I'm coming in here and I'm going this way, I'm getting a lengthening that way. If I come in and do this, I'm getting a lengthening here, but I'm getting a shortening there. If I do this, I'm getting a shortening here and a lengthening here. When you start to think like that, your sequence makes sense. Once you figure out, that's what Luke is teaching me here, how do you get around the body efficiently? You know, once you get that protocol down, which becomes assessment, then you can start thinking more about what you're trying to accomplish here. And then, are you bending it or twisting it or sliding it back and forth? This is all leading up to the idea of, oh, that's that cute. This idea of kneading.
I didn't have a scrub top.
So I am going to defer to Luke now on the efficiency of kneading. And he's got a lot of props up here to show that. But how to do it so that you're not, boy, you want to see some funny stuff. You know, when you go look at videos of people doing massage, look at the, you know, things you see around kneading. It can get really bizarre. And you want to stop and think. We had a discussion while he's getting set up here. We had a discussion in the class last week about lymphatics. And that was our topic. And the approach here is mimic normal. If you're going to mimic normal, then you need to know what normal is. And functionality, physiology has got some anatomy that goes with it. So there's a lot of different approaches and opinions, a lot of opinions about what's the right way to do something, not just in supporting lymphatics, but in a lot of things. So, one of the things that is fairly common is that you're supposed to use this pressure right through here to open the drain points so that the lymphatics can flow into the vessels, right? It was you and me, Mary Beth, that were having this discussion. And so they're being taught to do this really light pressure right here.
Or like do priming, pumping,
Yeah,
you're supposed to do.
Prime the pump, whatever they're saying. So the structure they're trying to change the shape of to get a change in pressure in is way down deep. Yeah, it's like, you know, like this deep. It's like, how is this gonna do a thing?
Yeah.
Because what I had taught was more of a compression in and out and in and out, so that those tubes were being compressed, we think. And then when you let the pressure go, you get a suction. You get a change in the pressure gradient. So if what you're trying to do doesn't make sense with the anatomy and the physiology, then maybe you need to look at it a little bit differently. And of course, you know, somebody made that up and taught it to somebody else, and then they taught it to somebody else and charged them $5,000 for it. They're gonna hold on to that because they paid a lot of money for it and they're following this person around, and you know, and you better be cautious about that. So when we are, oh nice, when we are thinking about what we are doing, what we're trying to accomplish with these various methods, the bottom line is you want to change the shape of the tissue. You either want to pancake it, or you want to pull it, or you want to twist it, or you want to bend it. When you do that, that is going to influence nerves and vessels and all that other kind of stuff, which is gonna travel up through the nervous system and say, whoa, something's going on here. And the response of the central nervous system back out through the body is gonna be the result that you see. So if you can't change the shape of the tissue, you're not affecting the sensory mechanisms that are gonna deliver that message. Okay.
And just that meaning that if we get too lost in only doing one or two types of applications, then the tissue is only being stressed and distorted in those one or two ways. And that one way of changing the tissue may have an effect. It can be, I do nothing but manual lymph drain. And it's just gonna be light touch that, building up my models and stuff. My goal is just to move the pillowcase, to try to move the fluid that's just between the pillowcase and the foam. I need to just move this part of it to try to pump that up. So the amount of pressure I use is going to be less because I'm trying to just move that ideally. That's where like the cupping can be nice because it just lifts that and I can nudge it in a direction. Lymphatic drain gets taught though to start at where these drainage sites are, prime the pump, or whatever you want to call it, free up this space where everything needs to drain first, and then keep on moving fluid near that drain to the drain, and then we'll keep working your way out further and further, but you keep on just pushing stuff towards the drain. So in manual lymph drain, it's a lot of light pressure, little to no lotion, maybe a glide, but pretty much just a compression and or a glide with a little bit of a force direction that is in a particular direction towards the core of the body. So for lymphatic fluid movement, I can say that's the way, that's the pattern to follow for that specific outcome. But the body's so interrelated fluid stagnation in the superficial layers of tissue related to that connective tissue layer maybe getting a little less pliable and thickened down. To if that's occurring, if this starts getting swollen and less mobile, then movement's angry, and then underneath all of that, we have a layer of muscle that now isn't being moved as much, and just everything starts freezing up. And the more cold or frozen something is, the less the fluid is ever going to be pliable.
Or the connective tissue, which is jelly.
Yep.
It's
And
jelly.
if the connective tissue isn't pliable, is the fluid's fighting through jelly.
And the nerves get stuck, and those vessels, all of those vessels are embedded everywhere. And if you want to move fluid, you either squeegee or you squeeze a sponge, right?
Yeah.
And the petrissage, it's kneading now is the term that people are using, and to get away from the classical terms, is squeeze the sponge. If you're thinking fluid. If you are thinking connective tissue pliability, it's mash the jello. Alright, if you're thinking tone length of the muscle, is pull the receptors so they think it's stretching or contracting. And that's all we can do. What happened, then the nervous system and everything else has got to, there's either a local effect or there's a global effect.
And so part of that just being, all it ever ends up being is what, a push or a pull,
And a twist.
right? A push or a pull, and if coupled together, we can create torsions and twists. Because if this model can be thought of a few ways. This thing could be a bone, right? There's connective tissue that wraps around bones, that feeds into muscles. There needs to be slip and slide here. Or this could be 3 layers of muscle on the table as a bone. And each one of these layers needs to slip and slide ideally for everybody to be happy. You know, the whole continuum, it's all packaged together. The skin and superficial fascia is one big container of saran wrap or a wetsuit, like she always calls it. But everything inside of it has 2 components always, that there's a structural integrity for stability as well as mobility. And that's everything down to your organs. Your organs are cased in some kind of layer that holds that tissue in, but nothing wants to be frozen in a purely static state. There's always got to be some kind of, and it can be a secondary response to breathing, aspects of digestion related to the mobility that's created when we breathe, aspects of fluid movement, whether it be lymph or venous blood, related to what happens as the pressure changes occur in my thorax as I breathe. The body's really efficient in trying to get a lot of things done at once, usually associated with movement. And as people don't move, if they move less, or if this area has been permanently changed, so the tissue or the joint or whatever is less mobile, then they're not doing these things to the tissue that change the shape of it that would naturally self-regulate. If I can't move my knee enough to distort the skin and superficial fascia enough, the whole lymphatic thing is not being pumped the same amount, right?
When the tissue's gonna get stiff.
So, pushes and pulls, and getting more mindful about, there's 2 cool things with this, in that we're warming up superficial layers first before we even get to deep stuff. That makes sense, right? I gotta make contact, warm up the first layer, make it pliable and happy first before I start working deeper. But then just your mindset being related to everything the PowerPoint was even indicating.
I might not be on the right slide.
Oh, I just went to sleep. That, well, this is relating to pushes and pulls, which is still novel enough. But what each layer of tissue in a healthy state, what would it be capable of? Skin, superficial fascia, very pliable. it should be able to move in every direction pretty happily. Some areas are gonna be a little bit thicker and denser, like the lateral side of the leg or up and down the spine, a little bit thicker. Medial thigh, more pliable. That's normal. Identifying what's normal is where you will get as you practice this more and more. This feels like happy vinyl. That's normal vinyl. There's nothing weird there, you know. There's not a substance or something. It's not strangely hot or cold, you know. Over time you'll get more nuance like that, and part of it is this moves, but this is different. Where the tape is, that's different. That could be a scar, that could be scar tissue, or it could just be an area where things have thickened down for a myriad of reasons. So I'm much more, as I talk my way through this, I'm a bigger fan of just thinking, how many directions can I move the tissue, and can I do that efficiently in the time that I have? And if I can, I want to get as many things done at once as possible. So part of that light superficial work is a place where I just make my initial contact with people, and while I'm doing that, I'm just feeling, you know, moving the skin, superficial fascia, a couple of directions. Then as I apply the lotion, maybe that's going to be in a different direction. So ideally, if nothing jumps out at me, if I'm not seeing a big swollen area or something like that, I'm going, okay, everybody's happy here. I've warmed up that first layer. We can get to now we can go to the first layer of muscle. As my anatomy awareness builds out, I can think about what's the shape of that structure. On the torso, everything's shaped weirder, right? Bunch of diamond shapes and everything. The limbs, if this was just the upper leg, it's a little bit easier, usually just big tubes. So let's think of this even more simply as the upper arm. So here's the anterior compartment and the posterior compartment. And I know they're shaped like tubes. The fiber direction runs this way. So biceps up and down. And if I wanted to just try to lengthen those, create the perception of a stretch, but not torquing on joints. So when I mention stuff like, especially in sports related to stretching, tonic stretching of just grabbing a hold of a limb, taking the joint to a range that starts to create a perception of stretch, is usually focusing the stretch around the joint, the tendons of the ligaments. That's not actually what you want super loose. You want the stuff in between to be more pliable. So that's the with the grain against the grain. I don't need to go back in the slides. But positioning things, if I can move an arm around in such a way, or if I can always use my forearm, I just want to go with the grain, and then I sneakily move the arm in such a way across against the grain. If I have to pick one of the two, sometimes doing these three, this is where I think a lot of biomechanics problems occur, is people really trying to do the just with the grain thing. We're convinced we just want to follow that grain structure all the way up. Maybe you're getting so nuanced that you're mapping and feeling the muscle and you're wanting to follow it all the way. Part of that is what Sandy showed, of just go part way, take a step, and then go the rest of the way. It's just as effective. If I have to pick which ones to do between with the grain and against the grain versus crisscross, I probably just pick crisscross, because that one is going lengthening the fibers and bending them a little bit. Then if I go that way, lengthening those fibers and bending them a little bit. So if I have to pick, if I'm shortcutting, the diagonals tend to be best. And if an area needs more focus, then I really make sure I do all of it. I think about the structures there, line myself up as best I can. If I have to reposition the structure, or wait to get it in a different position where I know I can get to it better, and make sure that somewhere in this whole routine, those structures got lengthened, bent, maybe bent on diagonals. But the whole goal of here was talking about kneading.
You're getting there.
So,
So the point
That's
is,
all
if you do
pushes.
these things, you don't have to.
you don't really have to. look what I did. But what's this hand usually doing? So the underlying thing, some of what we saw practicing when I came around, if the non-working hand can be placed in such a way where one, it squares my body up, but if I also just let it stabilize them, so that as I push, this whole thing doesn't move, just what I'm pushing on moves. If this anchors and holds this area stationary, now I get a torsion. If I bend an adjacent joint and hold on to it, apply some compression, and pull it toward me a little bit. If I get sneaky with some applications, it's about how do I position the joint as I start massaging. That's creating more of a lengthening effect. I shortened it, compressed, and lengthened it. Now look, I'm getting a stretch without having to take anything to end range. That's pin and stretch. But a kneading can be just as efficient as just grab something and create torsions and twists. Now, for the entry level people in the group, one of the key reasons why there's a longer period of time at the beginning of the class is if you're working over clothing, is to teach that you don't wanna be doing, if you are doing a mechanical, one hand pushing, one hand pulling, if the hands are too close together, I'm getting a tiny bit of torsion on this part, but I'm not getting a whole lot done, and it's easy for me to slip. I'm using my fingers more to accomplish this. I might pinch the skin more. Hands close together, fingers close together, not very efficient. The bigger I can make this, so I've just found in teaching that if I get everybody to get good at this idea of place your push hand, get good at compression first, just think like this, okay? Get good at maybe stabilizing the body with your other hand, because that also squares your body out. But just be thinking about a push. But now if I just make this all bigger, place more on one side. Sometimes I make myself a little bit crooked. So as I square up, I'm a little bit pre-crooked, get a good hand, that's helping me reach to get somewhere. But then by the time I'm actually applying force, I'm straightening out at my shoulder girdle. But the goal here is just these torsions. And then I can be strategic as, usually the bigger the sandwich effect, the better. But if I can just be strategic about where am I pulling as well as where am I pushing? This could be one compartment. Can I focus that? Focus this torsion, this push and pull just here? Or do I make it so big? This isn't really illustrating it all.
Yeah, I got a hold for you. I gotta be an attachment.
Yeah.
Logan, you need to be an attachment on the other side.
it's fine.
Or Tanya does. Okay,
So,
now
Really?
you've listened.
yeah, really with kneading,
There it is.
I can make it big. I'd rather it be too big than too small. That's hard on me, and it's just, look how much contact I allow with that pull hand. And where therapists, let's go around, you guys can go ahead. They want to tenderize, they want it to go fast. It turns into this. As opposed to if you can't learn how to basically do these applications slow, you gotta start there before you can even start getting to the fast stuff. I may use that a little bit, warming up a particular area.
That's a squeeze the sponge.
But as you're just really trying to build out your body mechanics, it's like a glide is not nearly as important at the beginning than learning how to just do a compression. You learn to do a compression so that you can take that compression and turn it into a glide. You learn this counter pressure, push and pull, so that you can turn that into a knee. And I promise as you feel this stuff, if you make it bigger and slower, the sensation feels more profound because more is happening.
So if I were gonna add anything to this, I need you to be
Okay.
an attachment.
Okay.
All right, Tanya, I need you to be an attachment. So typically when you see petrissage, kneading, you see something that looks like this. I don't do that. I push and I pull.
You show how she made it bigger, and she kept it the same push hand.
And then I turn around and come the other direction.
People get real messy trying to.
Yes, that was me day one. I went home, all right, I gotta try this. I'm like,
You should never sacrifice the same mechanic that you use for compression. This should always be the starting point. The rest comes after. It should only be helping the push. You can turn things into they're just a pull, so if you just hold that. Occasionally I can just come over and get a hold of something and create a nice pull, but there aren't too many places where that makes a lot of sense. There's some, but it's not nearly as common for us to use that versus push. The vast majority of massage at some level is the massage therapist doing a push as their main effect. And you just getting strategic of, well, good bolstering holds a person more stable. That's great. Thinking about where this hand can just be holding them down so that the twist happens all by itself. All I'm really worried about is my compression, but I'm just getting that extra effect. And that secret sauce of when you can, as long as it doesn't disrupt your body mechanics, if you can be doing any part of the compression or glide with some joint movement, you're getting the shear effects and or torsion effects by moving that joint. If I can just get a hold of it and not be taking things to end range, and get a better hold of here. But if I'm working on, trying to think if I had my other model,
Okay.
laying in sideline. Yeah. Oh, that's a good one. Let's just say that I'm getting a hold of the foot. I just plantar flex, dorsiflex, maybe around, low rotations, not big end range movements. It's not all about what I'm doing to the joint, it's about what is that joint movement doing to where I'm compressing. I'm here, and just subtle movements sometimes. I've even just grabbed around the Achilles and just kind of